Let's move into a general discussion on corporate arrogance and image and reputation and behavior and how a PR person really deals with all of this. Now, over the years, we've had quite a few organizations that have been labeled as an arrogant corporation, okay? They no longer take responsibility for their actions or their community. Can you talk a little bit about this, this arrogance and corporate social responsibility, and shed some light on how PR practitioners can protect the interests of their organization's stakeholders?
Well, I have to say that I'm embarrassed by the performance of many of our best corporations over the past 5 or 10 years, and very embarrassed by the apparent greed of the most senior officers in the amount of recompense that they seem to attract, regardless of whether or not they've done the job well. And I think one of the things that drives the arrogance is greed. And I think that is a very, very bad circumstance. There was a time in this country, and maybe we're going to get back to it because we keep changing managers a lot. Early on in my career, we had managers like Irv Shapiro and Rich Jones, a couple of people that I worked for, Meyer for one, and others, who felt that a corporation had responsibilities that went beyond the bottom line, that you had a responsibility to try to provide jobs for people so that you'd have healthy communities and schools could be supported, that you had a responsibility to protect the quality of life in the communities in which you operated, that you didn't need to drive every last possible dollar of profit to the bottom line as rapidly as possible. And that's changed. I think the general management attitude now is drive every last possible dollar of profit to the bottom line as rapidly as we can. Now we'll get ours, and the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, that's something for somebody else to worry about. That disturbs me a lot, and I would like to see a different approach to that. Of course, the rewards are tremendous, as we all read and know, and I've, not to that extent, but I've benefited from that, and I'm maybe a little bit disingenuous by making this point. But that embarrasses me. Now, the arrogance, where does the arrogance come from? I think the arrogance comes from the fact that most senior corporate executives are insulated. They travel in a circle where all right-thinking people think the way they do. Their mantra is, we work for the shareholder, which means our job is to get all the money that we can, or all the profit that we can get. And I guess that's okay. I mean, I'm glad the stock prices are insulated. They don't understand. They've lost touch with what it's like to go to work every day and have to make car payments, a worry about whether or not you can get your kid through college, or whether or not you're going to have enough medical insurance to take care of your family. They've lost all touch with that, and they have almost no contact with it, which is where, in my opinion, the CPRO, the public relations officer, comes in. Because part of his job, very large part of his job, ought to be the reality check for the CEO. He ought to be and the senior management. He ought to be the guy in there telling them what's going on, how people are feeling, what the effect of their actions will have on people in general. You may remember the story about the Roman emperors. When they would return to Rome after having conquered most of the known world, or whatever it was he had conquered that particular year or month, as he rode in his chariot and the crowds were on the side throwing flowers and yelling grandly, this little guy riding in the chariot with him, whispering in his ear, "You are mortal. You are mortal." And I think our CEOs many of our CEOs, many of our senior managers lose that understanding that they are mortal. One guy, one of our senior guy, I liked the guy a lot, and I thought he was awfully good, and I think he said this merely jokingly, but only halfway jokingly. He kept referring to the people on the 22nd floor as we godlike creatures. There's some of that feeling, and the role of the PR, in my opinion, the role of the PR person is to bring some reality into that mix. Now that takes a certain amount of courage. It takes a certain amount of courage, but it also takes a certain amount of intelligence. You can't go rattling in, knocking on the door, and saying, "Hey, buddy, that's dumb. Stop it." I mean, you've got to exercise your skills as a communicator, but to get those points made. But I think it's a very strong responsibility of public relations managers.